How do professional artists adapt so well to completely different art styles without copying and without making the drawing feel out of place? Look at this piece by Danish or this one by Yo Yoshinari. Different characters, different visual languages, different rules, but drawn by the same artist in a way that still feels natural. They don't feel like random fan art wearing the wrong costume. And you've probably felt the opposite problem. You try to draw a character from memory or copy a character you really like and it gets close, but something for some reason still feels off. Maybe the eyes are almost right, the shapes are almost right, the vibe is almost there, everything's almost, but nothing hits the target. So in this video, I will show you what professional artists are doing when they need to adapt to a new style. I'll explain the main logic behind it, and then I'll show you how I use that same thinking to draw Homer Simpson in his original style and then translate him into the style of Dragon Ball Z. What even is an art style? Because the style is not only the surface stuff. It's not just spiky hair, cool eyes, or nice line art. Style is a set of visual decisions that repeat. It's how a project takes reality and decide what's to remove, what's to simplify, what to exaggerate, and what to make iconic. Decisions about shape, proportion, details, colors, line quality, simplification, exaggeration, and even the limits of the medium itself. A cute cartoon makes different decisions from an action cartoon. Pixel art was shaped by the technical limits of its time. Animation often simplifies characters because someone has to draw them again and again and again without losing their mind somewhere around episode 4. And this choice repeats enough time that your brain starts to see them as a visual style. That's why, when I started with Homer in his original style, I wasn't trying to make my version of Homer. My goal was to make him feel like he could be an official drawing. So I started collecting references, model sheets, and style guide pages. And right away, those references start showing the rules. Big simple head, very readable shapes, clean line, flat colors, almost no texture, proportions that are way more exaggerated than they look at first. At one point, I checked my sketch and the body was too big. His arms were too thin, his neck was too thick. The whole thing was close, but not quite there. And that close but not quite zone is where the problem actually lives. And professional artists deal with that constantly. In a real project, the artist usually can't just draw however they feel that day. There is an art direction. The project has a face. Characters, backgrounds, props, color, line work, everything needs to feel like it belongs to the same place. If 10 artists work in the same project, the final result can't look like 10 separate visual worlds. There's an idea I heard from Manu Mercurio in a video more focusing on animation and character work. When artists adapt well to a production style, their individual hands become less visible. Which I know, it sounds a little tragic for the artist's ego, but professionally, that's the job. You help protect the consistency of the project, and to do that, you need to understand the rules behind the style. In the Simpsons version, one of those rules was the line. I looked at the original drawings and the line is thin, clean, and controlled. It doesn't have a lot of dramatic variation. So I used a smoother line work brush, added stabilization, and zoomed in more than I usually do, because the style asked for it. That's a small point, but it matters. When you change styles, your normal habits don't always fit. Sometimes the brush changes. Sometimes you need to use more zoom than usual, like I did. Sometimes the amount of details changes. Sometimes the whole way you build your drawing changes. So the Simpsons version became my control test. Can I follow the existing rules close enough that Homer still feels like Homer? And now the harder question. What happens when there is no official reference? If I want to draw Homer in Dragon Ball Z style, I can't just search official Dragon Ball Homer model sheet and copy that. That simply doesn't exist. To do that, I need to understand how Dragon Ball translates people. That's what a professional artist does when they enter a new style. They study how that style is different from reality. Again, what does it exaggerate? What does it simplify? What kinds of shape does it prefer? How does it draw eyes, nose, mouth, hands? Clothes. How does it handle line, shadow, color, detail? In my case, I started looking for Dragon Ball characters that could answer specific questions. For Homer's body type, I didn't want to use Majin Buu as the main reference. Homer is not built like Buu. Even in The Simpsons, characters like Barney and the cop chief, I forget the name, are heavier than him, so he's not obese. Homer is more like a dad, he's more like dad-shaped. So Ox King became a much better reference. For the eyes, I looked at Android 8 because he has this softer, innocent, slightly goofy feeling that fits Homer better than just giving him intense Vegeta eyes. For the chin and heavier neck area, I looked at Yajirobe, but pulled it back so Homer didn't become too heavy. That's the kind of thing I mean by studying a style. And this is where beginners usually get trapped. They copy icons, eye icons, hair icons, mouth icons, cool anime nose. That can work if the drawing is in the same angle as the reference, but once you change pose, expression, body type, camera angle, those copied symbols stop being enough. That's why fundamentals keep showing up. Annoying, I know, but if style is, like I said, a way of simplifying or exaggerating the reality, you need some understanding of the reality itself. That's why copying a character in 2 or 3 poses doesn't mean you can actually adapt that style. The moment you change the angle, these copied symbols stop helping. If you don't understand the head, the nose as a form, a shape, a 3-dimensional shape, you won't be able to rotate it in any angle you want. If you don't understand the body underneath, the style sits on top like a sticker. Think of it like a pizza. The style is the flavor, and the fundamentals are the dough. The dough alone is not the exciting part of the pizza, but if it's bad, the whole pizza suffers. And I swear to God that this makes sense for both pizza and drawing. So when I translate in Homer, I'm trying to keep 2 things alive at the same time: the identity of Homer and the rules of Dragon Ball. So I keep the bald head, the mouth area, the shirt, the belly, and that very specific "this man should not operate a nuclear plant" energy. But I translate the construction: sharper eyes, clothes with more folds and details, lines that thinner and organic, with gut hatching, and a number of other things to be noted. And even after studying, the first version usually won't be perfect. Professional artists just don't learn a style once and then draw it perfectly forever. That's not how it works. They need to compare, correct, and go back to the references. In a studio, an art director can point out what feels wrong. Without an art director, you need to become a little bit annoying with your own art. Sometimes the part you like is the part that doesn't belong. In my Dragon Ball Homer, I avoided the classic pointy Dragon Ball nose because it didn't fit this version of Homer as well. The ear was another thing I had to treat carefully, because Dragon Ball Z ear is iconic. If I made it generic, it wouldn't be Dragon Ball Z style. The beard area was tricky too. I used Otokusuki as a reference for the rough facial hair, but at first it became too dense, so I spaced the marks out and made them more uneven. That's an important point too. Adapting a style doesn't mean forcing every rule onto the character. Sometimes the rule helps, sometimes it breaks the character, sometimes I need to pull a rule back, sometimes I need to push it harder. The hard part is knowing how far the style lets you push it. The line also changed a bit between the 2 drawings. Even they both using a thin simple black line, it has its differences. The Simpsons line is cleaner and more controlled. The Dragon Ball line is a bit thinner, more organic and more imperfect. It has more little marks, more hatching, more information about the volume. So even though both styles are line out heavy, they don't ask for the same hand movement. They don't ask for the same brush behavior, the same level of control, and that's also why tools matter. A brush won't understand the style for you, but it can help you get the right line, sketch, shadow, or render faster. So if you want the brushes I'm using here, I made a free essential brush pack for Photoshop and Clip Studio Paint. It's the small set I use in 99% of my drawings, so you don't have to download 1,000 brushes and spend your evening trying to figure out what each one is supposed to do. There's also a short guide showing how I use each brush. The link is below and it's free. After the line art, the same problem continues with color and shadow. With the Simpsons version, the choice was pretty clear. The colors are simple, readable, and mostly flat. I tested something closer to the TV look first, then pushed it a little closer to the movie version, with lighter colors and a very subtle shadow and highlight. Dragon Ball, on the other hand, was less obvious. The big question here was Homer's skin. Do I keep the yellow, or do I give him a more natural skin tone so he fits Dragon Ball better? If he go too natural, he starts losing that instant Homer identity. If I keep the full Simpsons yellow, he can feel pasted in Dragon Ball instead of translated into it. So I kept the yellow but muted it. Then I make the shadows in a way that still fits the style. Mostly flat shadow shapes, slightly warm, with a few darker areas where the forms need more structure. And after that, I added a little noise and a small highlight in the eye to help the final image looks less sterile. So now we can compare the two. Same character, different visual roles. The Simpsons version is simple, flat, controlled, and extremely readable. Big shapes, clean line, simple colors, very little texture. Everything's built to be read fast. The Dragon Ball version has stronger construction, sharper shapes, thinner organic line work, more folds, more hatching, and more volume. It still needs to feel like Homer, but now he is translated through a different visual language. And so, how does a professional artist draw in different styles without just copying? They don't just eyeball the whole thing, freestyle it, they follow a process. You need a solid enough base to build the drawing first, because if the structure is broken, the style won't fix it. Then the process is basically study the style, apply it with references nearby, compare and correct with references, and repeat. That's it. That's the loop. and you just saw me doing that with Homer. I studied the Simpsons rules, applied them, corrected the mistakes, and tried to make the drawing feel official. Then I studied Dragon Ball references, picked the ones that solved specific problems, applied those decisions to Homer, corrected what felt weird, and kept comparing until it felt closer. This is not the full method, this is the surface of it. I will show the process more directly in the next video with another character. And if my full method is already available when you're watching this, it will be the first link in the description. The free brush pack I used here is down there too. If you want to see the practical version, click the next video.